All right, welcome everybody, and everybody's out there, by the way. John and Kristen here.
It's hard not to look at the
I know we want to
screen.
look at the screen. Hey, welcome to our YouTube live on Gilgamesh versus Noah. Tonight we're going to give a brief overview of who these people are. Then we're going to test tank their vehicles. What I mean by that is this. There's over 300 legends, flood legends throughout the world. What I mean by flood legends, I'm talking about Noah's Ark, the flood, the biblical flood that you may have, read or heard about. There's 300 versions of that throughout the world. One of the most famous is the Gilgamesh Epic. The Gilgamesh Epic was found in 600 BC in an Assyrian library. Apparently the king loved to read, and he collected 50,000 of these stone tablets in, cuneiform. And let me just kind of give you a close-up view of it. This is tablet number 11 of the Gilgamesh Epic. The epic is an entire story. But on tablet 11, in 1872, an assistant at the British Museum deciphered it and found that this was the flood, a flood legend. Well, that's wonderful. And let's bring our buddy Gilgamesh up here. This is Gilgamesh. How do you do? He in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East or whatever, maybe even parts of Europe, is still considered a rock star. Similar to our Superman. He's a 3,800-year-old Superman. He's a rock star. And his story is told, retold, depictions of him. He's famous. We don't know who he is. At least I didn't. But he built an ark to save humankind and animals. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And my wife came up.
He supposedly built it.
Supposedly he built it. Now, some consider that this right here, the Bible, and the story told in here in Genesis 6 and 7 is inferior to this that was told in 1800 BC. Moses wrote this in 1450 BC. Gilgamesh, or whoever the scribe was, 1800 BC. So you can see that there's 350 years difference between these two. Now,
remember, BC goes backwards. So they're saying that this was written more recently, and so therefore is a copycat or some kind of takeoff on this.
Exactly. And so we're going to test that tonight. What we want to ask is this. Is there one that is a champion as far as if they were both written at the same time and not written years apart, where you could use the excuse that Moses basically plagiarized what was written on this tablet? Let's see if there's other evidence that will indicate which is the, not fraud, but you know what I'm getting at, which is the superior story. Let's deal first with the arcs themselves.
And then we'll go into why this one came after.
Yes. You're going to want to stick around for that because the punchline is
interesting explanation.
Based on the biblical record and eyewitnesses of Noah's Ark over the last 150 years, this is a relatively good rendition of it, model of it. And it's got a 6-to-1 ratio. Let's talk about the actual mechanics of this. A 6-to-1 ratio, so 1 to 6, which are modern oil tanks, follow the same pattern for stability. It's good for cargo. That's why this is designed the way it is. It didn't have necessarily a rudder or a motor or a sail or anything like that. It was there to float. Now, interesting, in 1975, in preparation for the film In Search of Noah's Ark, the Scripps Oceanographic Institution had a model of this made, and they tested it in their test tanks that they use for the Navy. What they found was that this ark design could withstand waves of up to 200 feet, and it could pitch and yaw 90 degrees without any water getting inside and without it tipping over. The other remarkable thing is that when it was in the tank, the waves, it would naturally align itself into the waves. And that's what you want to do. I was in the Navy. When you're aligning yourself with the waves like this, this is where this happens. And when this happens, people get seasick, people get hurt. And so you want to, as much as you can when you're traveling on the ocean, you want to go into the waves, okay? It's not always possible, but that's the ideal. This would according to the scripts, this automatically aligned itself when it was just sitting there into the waves. Anyway, I think that's pretty remarkable. It took 120 years to build this. And then the flood was 371 days long. What? I thought it just rained 40 days and 40 nights.
No, there's a lot more to it than that.
371 days from the time they got inside the ark to the time that they left. That's how long they were in there for.
And it wasn't just water. It was earthquakes, super volcanoes, meteors. There's things all through the layers.
Here's Gilgamesh's ark. His ark consisted of a cube with 6 levels, and there was about 192 feet by 192 feet. He built it in 7 days. You got to understand that Gilgamesh was 1/3 God, 2/3 human. Okay. He built this, the gods told him to, and to get people inside, the animals inside, because they were going to destroy the earth. And so in 7 days, he created the ark. The flood came 7 days later. The earth was inundated. And then he said he started sending out the birds, pigeons, and then a crow, similar to what the biblical record is. And then finally, when they got dry land in their mouth, indicating that it was dry, they could get out. 7 days. 7 days, the flood, versus 371 days. Which is going to be more stable? This one or this one? That's what we're here to find out. Now, just because one is more stable than the other, does that necessarily mean that one is superior over the other as far as the story? We think it's an indicator. And that's what we're going to do today. So,
right.
Let me go ahead and take these 2 models, and we're going to set them out of the way. And let me introduce to you first our 2 contenders. Here's Noah's Ark, 6-to-1 ratio, approximately 450 to 600 feet long, depending on the cubit that you use, and about anywhere between 75 to 100 feet wide, and anywhere between 45 to 60 feet tall. Had a 6-to-1 ratio. There it is. Okay. The Gilgamesh Ark, 192 feet, 192 feet, 192 feet, 120 cubits square, 6 levels. All right, why don't we go ahead and we're going to move our test tank into our shot here, and then we're going to test them and see who wins. All right, why don't we go ahead and set this up on top of here.
We need to make sure we don't get water on the computer.
Move that back over.
Okay.
And let's go ahead and set it up right on top of here. You can go ahead and put the cloth there on top of the computer. All right, guys and gals, are you ready for this? Yeah, we're going to do this. All right, so why don't we go ahead and take Noah's Ark first and put it in the test tank and just see how buoyant or whatever it is. Okay. So you can see that if you try to tip this over, and it's not weighted down like there's animals and things inside. So my understanding is when they did that at Scripps, they had it weighted down approximately 1/3 draft, and this is about 1/2. Okay. So I had tested this before, and I got it to about 65 degrees before it started to think about tipping over. Look at that. And then if you have waves and whatnot, this thing isn't going anywhere. Pretty stable, I would say. All right. Here's Gilgamesh. Here's Gilgamesh's ark. We're going to put him in next. Oh! Okay, and then we have a little bit of waves and whatnot. And if this was any deeper, you would see this. And these aren't just hardly any way. Okay, everybody just died. Okay, everybody's dead now inside the ark. All right, so Kristen, let me ask you something. When we talked about this story and everything, you had an idea about why, even though the story in Genesis is 350 years younger, okay, than the Gilgamesh story, what was the purpose of relating that story so many years later?
Okay, so what God was doing is using Moses to straighten out the record of what had happened, because post-flood, again, this is from a creationist standpoint, using the Bible and other sources as history. You have tremendous apostasy very rapidly. I mean, you have power plays where you've got kings all over the place. Every little town had a king. You had sexual immorality of every kind. Sodom and Gomorrah, when the inhabitants were struck blind for trying to, they wanted fresh meat. They wanted the angels to be brought out. The angels were in the form of men, and they wanted them brought out because they wanted to know them, which means to have sex with them. And they, even after being struck blind, they wearied themselves trying to find the door. They weren't like, "What am I doing?" There was apostasy, sexual immorality, violence, and a lot of different examples we could go into from different sources in history, including the Bible. But what God was doing was using Moses to straighten out that record, because in their apostasy, all they had was remnants. Like if you look at the creation story on the different tablets, or you look at it on the different pieces of metal or stone that they had, you'll see, the tree of life and two beings guarding it. And you have remnants of what happened in the Garden of Eden. You have remnants of what happened during the flood, but they lost that knowledge of what actually happened. And God was setting the record straight and saying, yes, there really was a creation story. This is how it happened. Yes, there really was a flood. This is how it happened. So even though the biblical account was written several hundred years after the Gilgamesh story, it is a correction of what really happened.
And I want to encourage folks out there to read it for yourself, meaning that go ahead and go online, go to Bible Gateway or whatever, read Genesis 6 and 7. That's where the story is. This right here, folks, just to wrap it up, is one of 300 legends of the flood throughout the world. We just suggest humbly that this is the best rendition of that story, the most accurate. And from what you saw in this tank test, at least what we have discovered is that there is one ark that is more stable than the other and more practical. And I think that says something. All right. Thank you for joining us. And if you like this type of thing, hit the subscribe button. It's so overused, but go ahead and do that, because we're going to be putting more out as time goes on. Thank you for joining us. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.